Today on the Enneagram, we are going to be discovering the inner strengths and desires of the Enneagram 4. I'm excited for you to join me. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grow RDH podcast. My name is Katie and I am your host. I'm a dental hygienist from South Dakota, and here on this podcast we like to talk about all things dental hygiene. The last few weeks we have been introducing the 9 Enneagram types. We've so far gotten through 1 through 3, and my goal in this was to try to find the different Enneagram types and interview them on their experiences in dental hygiene. And you guys, I did my best. I tried. I could not find an Enneagram 4. I'm still looking for 5 too. So my idea for this episode is to use ChatGPT as an Enneagram 4. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the interview questions that I wrote and I'm going to interview ChatGPT, and I have prompted it to answer me like an Enneagram 4 would answer. So I'm excited to see its responses. And if you're an Enneagram 4 and you're listening to this, type in the chat. I would love to hear if you think ChatGPT got it right. So first, let's introduce the Enneagram 4. The Enneagram 4 is known as the Individualist or the Romantic. They're known for their deep emotions, their introspection, and their desire for authenticity. Enneagram 4s are really driven by their need to express themselves. And by express themselves, they specifically want to be able to express their individuality and their uniqueness. 4s often feel different from others, and that can really lead into having a deep, rich inner world. Their inner world is really kind of their sense of longing. They value beauty, depth, and introspection. In relationships, they really value depth and meaning as well. They really desire a deep connection with somebody, and they sometimes might have a sense of longing or melancholy in that they never quite feel fulfilled, or they never quite feel understood by others. This lends itself to some really great strengths in dental hygiene, specifically as a career. Enneagram 4s could potentially be very deeply in tune with their patients, and they might have really, really high abilities to express empathy. They can bring some creativity. I think sometimes our perfectionism and, our rigid sense of control, sometimes I think having some input that maybe is a little more creative or maybe a little more artistic even can really take us dental hygienists kind of out of our box. Enneagram 4s probably really want to make a deep, meaningful impact in whatever scenario or setting they're in. So this could be making a deep impact with a patient. It could be making a deep impact with their coworkers. They also might have a strong sense of intuition when the patient is not feeling seen, right? That kind of ties back to the empathy piece. They may have a beat on what the patient's not saying, or maybe some unspoken emotions or thoughts that the patient doesn't want to tell you because they maybe don't feel in control. Some challenges an Enneagram 4 might have in the workplace, though, is tying back to their individualistic nature, is not being understood or feeling on the outside. They may be disconnected a little bit from a rigid, strict work environment. They can also be prone to some emotional highs and lows. When they feel happy, they feel very, very happy. When they feel down, they feel very, very down. They might struggle a little bit with routine. Again, in dental hygiene, routines are key to keeping things moving on track. And Enneagram 4s might really look for any of those creative outlets within their workplace to let them express their individuality in a work setting. And finally, Enneagram 4s might be a little bit sensitive to criticism because they see criticism as an attack on who they are and their personality instead of maybe a work task or something that they've done. So let's get into the interview with Sir ChatGPT. I don't know if I've named my ChatGPT, and maybe I should, but I'm going to ask it 6 questions about the Enneagram 4 and how they would respond in the workplace. And I'm going to be looking this way because this is where my screen is, and I'm going to read to you what ChatGPT said. The first question is essentially just what drew you to dental hygiene, and do you feel that it aligns with your need for individuality? And ChatGPT said, Honestly, I kind of resisted it at first. I always thought I'd do something more artistic, something where I could fully express myself. But there's an artistry in dental hygiene that most people don't see. The way you approach patient care, the way you adapt your techniques to each person, the way you can make someone feel something through your presence. I found ways to make it my own, even in a structured field. So that was its response. And I agree. I do believe that there is a lot of opportunities for expressing creativity and expressing individuality in dental hygiene. And again, if you're an Enneagram 4, put it in the chat. Do you believe that dental hygiene career aligns with an Enneagram 4's need for individuality? The second question is related again to workflow. And the question is, how do you navigate the day-to-day structure and routine of dental hygiene while still feeling satisfied without feeling stifled? And ChatGPT said, routine is hard for me. The idea of doing the same thing in the same way every day makes me want to run for the hills, but I focus on the people. Every patient is different. Every mouth tells a story. I try to find meaning in the small moments, like connecting with a nervous patient or making someone laugh. I also love those moments where I can really educate someone in a way that resonates, that feels creative to me. So again, ChatGPT is saying that, again, when they're focusing on the patient and the uniqueness of the patient, which I love from that, trying to see that individuality in the patients brings about some of that creativity, some of that spark that makes them feel unique. And by looking at the patient and seeing what's unique about the patient, they're able then to connect with the patient and maybe express their own feelings of uniqueness and creativity. The next question I asked ChatGPT was about an Enneagram 4's emotional depth. Again, personally believe that Enneagram 4s would be great connectors with patients because they feel so deeply. So the question I asked it was this: Enneagram 4s are known for their emotional depth. How does this affect your relationships with your coworkers and patients? And ChatGPT said this: I feel everything. If a patient is anxious, I absorb that. If a coworker is off, I can sense it before they even say anything. It makes me really intuitive, which is a strength, but it's also exhausting. I can't just clock in and clock out. I take a lot home with me. That's the hard part. But when I have a deep, real conversation with a patient and they feel seen, that makes it all worth it. So about that response, I find it very interesting. That's not something that I even thought about, was taking things home with you. I think healthcare fatigue probably happens to a lot of us, but I could see how Enneagram fits with their deep intuition and introspection into feelings and relationships. I could see how that could lend itself to having a really hard time making those boundaries and not being able to leave work and just leave work at home, right? I'm sure they are absorbing and like ChatGPT said, anticipating even anxiety, anger, and even those tension feelings in the workplace when things aren't said, but they're shown through nonverbals, and you can just tell when people are upset with you. I can imagine that for somebody that feels that intuition and that introspection very deeply, I could see how that would be really hard to let go and leave at the office. The next question, I wrote about one of their weaknesses, and one of them is feeling misunderstood. So the question was, have you ever struggled with feeling misunderstood in the workplace as a dental hygienist, and how do you handle it? And ChatGPT said, constantly. I think differently than a lot of my coworkers. I'm not the smile and get through it type. I want meaning in my work. Sometimes I feel like my passion or intensity makes people uncomfortable, like I care too much about things that others brush off, but I've learned to embrace it. I remind myself that just because I feel different doesn't mean I don't belong. So I really like that answer. And I think maybe we've all been there when we have felt that our passion and our intensity makes people feel awkward or weird around us. And nobody wants to feel that way, right? If you feel passionate about something or intense about something and people are giving you like the what vibes, it doesn't feel good, and it makes you feel diminished. It makes you feel less worthy or less respected. And so I just wonder, I think those feelings of maybe like imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome or feeling like you don't belong probably comes to all of us at some point. And like ChatGPT said, they've learned to embrace that. And I'm just wondering if that's something that we can all look for in work-life integration and making sure that we don't let those outside influences diminish our passion and diminish our intensity, because usually that's where big change comes from, is passion and intensity. So if you are an Enneagram 4 and you feel passion, keep that passion. Don't let anybody make you feel like you are on the outside looking in. The fifth question I kind of put to ChatGPT as something like, what would you do as an Enneagram 4 to make dental hygiene look differently? So I asked if there was one thing that you could change about this profession, about dental hygiene, to make it more fulfilling for somebody that is as unique and individualistic as you, what would you do? And ChatGPT said this: I wish there was more room for expression in dental hygiene. Like, why don't we talk more about the human experience of the job, the emotional labor, the connection, the deeper purpose behind what we do? I'd love to see more creative approaches to patient care, more emphasis on storytelling and personal growth in the field. And I just love that response. I think that sometimes, and maybe, the last Enneagram episode we talked with Haley Brugman, she was a 3. I'm also high scoring 3. My highest is an 8, but my 3 is way up there. And we were talking about how sometimes we as hygienists just get in the grind and you're just checking stuff off the to-do list and you are grinding and putting in the hours to the point where sometimes it does feel a little bit like a robot. Groundhog Day, you're experiencing the same thing over and over, and you just do it because you are achieving and it's part of your job and you're a perfectionist and this is how we do things. So I just love this response that there's nothing wrong with bringing expression into dental hygiene. Storytelling. When you look at some of the marketing and business practices, it comes when brands are trying to express their mission, express their vision. One of the things they tell you is you have to become a good storyteller. You have to be able to know the why and have meaning and feeling behind the why for people to come on board with you. That's one of the biggest things in leadership, is being a storyteller. So I love that ChatGPT put that in that response. I'll read this part. Again, I'd love to see more creative approaches to patient care, more emphasis on storytelling and personal growth. So again, if you're an Enneagram 4, let me know. Do you resonate with that? Do you wish that there was more storytelling, more emphasis on creativity in dental hygiene? And if you're not a 4, maybe you have somebody in your life that's a 4 that inspires you to be more creative and more unique. The final question that I asked ChatGPT was about the emotional connections with patients. I asked, how do you balance the emotional weight of connecting with patients? Because, like I said, with healthcare fatigue, that can be hard for all of us. But for an Enneagram 4 who really feels that deeply, how do you balance with taking on the emotional weight of that from patients or coworkers while maintaining your own well-being? And this is what ChatGPT said. It's a work in progress. I have to remind myself that I can't carry everyone's emotions. I try to have creative outlets outside of work, writing, music, anything that lets me process what I'm feeling. And I'm learning to set better emotional boundaries. I can give my best to patients without losing myself in the process. Again, another great answer. And this response actually reminds me of the chat I had with Heather, the Relaxed Hygienist. Do you guys remember that episode? Her whole platform is talking about burnout. And one of the topics that we talked about was learning to set boundaries. And so this response reminds me of all of the good advice that she gave us. And so I think I'm going to link that interview down in the chat just in case you missed it. If you are looking for any tips on how to reduce burnout and to set better emotional boundaries, her interview was amazing. But that's what this reminds me of. It reminds me of her talking about how to set those boundaries, how to keep yourself healthy first, right? And again, it's kind of like the warning they give you in the airplane, right? You put your oxygen mask on first before you can help anybody else. And for an Enneagram 4, it sounds like that's even more important for them because they feel so deeply and they sometimes may not be able to separate those boundaries as easy as some of us who may not have as deep of that emotional connection. So yeah, I love the recommendation to find creative outlets. I think having some sort of creative way to express yourself and really get that release is amazing, and it's really good advice for all of us. But if you're listening as a 4, it may be exceptionally good advice for you to be able to reduce the impact of healthcare fatigue. And that was it. That was all the questions that I asked ChatGPT. I thought that was a really fun experiment to do, and hopefully I can find a 5, but if I can't find a 5, we're going to ask ChatGPT about an Enneagram 5 as well next week, Friday. I would love to hear from all of you. If you are a dental hygienist and you feel like you are a 4, did this resonate with you? Do you have some of these same thoughts and experiences in your practice? And if you're not, do you have any 4s in your life that really embody that creativity and that intuition of what 4s bring to the table? I think a 4 would make a great addition to any office just by bringing unique thoughts and ideas to the sometimes very structured and, might I say, sometimes boring world of dental hygiene. I think an Enneagram 4's intuition and creativity just would be so welcome, which a breath of fresh air, if you will, into a dental office. So if you have a 4, treat them well, make sure they feel like they belong, and try to validate everybody's experiences, even if they're experiences you might not necessarily understand. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are enjoying this content. Share with a dental hygienist that you feel could use some Enneagram information, and I look forward to chatting with you about the Enneagram 5 next week.